Leviticus Chapter 11, laws about animals for food. This is the original what we can eat for dinner kind of chapter. Some foods were off limits to Israel, but thank God for Acts chapter 10 that says we can have bacon again. The Lord spoke again to Moses and Aaron, saying to them, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, Among all the animals which are on the earth, these are the animals which you may eat. You may eat any animal that has a divided hoof, and chews the cud. Nevertheless, you are not to eat these which are among you. Chew the cud or divide the hoof. The camel, because it chews the cud but does not divide the hoof, it is unclean to you. And the shaphan, because it chews the cud but does not divide the hoof, it is unclean to you. What is a shaphan? I've never even heard of that. I had to look up what that was. I'm like, I don't know what that is. It says it's a small herbivorous animal that lives in caves and rock crevices. Learn something new every day. And the hare, because it chews the cud but does not divide the hoof, it is unclean to you. And the swine, because it divides the hoof, it makes a split hoof, but it does not chew the cud, it is unclean. You shall not eat their meat, nor touch their carcasses, they are unclean to you. These you may eat, whatever is in the water, whatever has fins and scales in the waters, in the seas and the rivers, these you may eat. But whatever does not have fins and scales in the seas and the rivers, of all the teeming life in the waters, and of all the living creatures that are in the waters, they are to be considered detestable to you. They shall be hated things to you. You may not eat their meat. You shall detest their carcasses. Everything in the water that does not have fins and scales is detestable to you. Avoid the unclean. These you shall detest among the birds. They are not to be eaten, for they are hated things: the eagle, the vulture, and the buzzard, the kite of every kind of falcon, every kind of raven, the ostrich, the nighthawk, the seagull, every species of hawk, the little owl, and the cormorant, and the great owl, the white owl, the pelican, the carrion vulture, the stork, all kinds of herons, the hoopie, and the bat. All winged insects that walk on all fours are detestable to you. Yet of all winged insects that walk on all fours you may eat those which have legs above their feet, with which to leap on the ground. Or these you may eat, the whole species of migratory locust, of bald locust, of crickets, and of grasshoppers. But all other winged insects are four-footed, are detestable to you. By contact with these, you will become unclean. Whoever touches their carcasses becomes unclean until the evening, till dusk. And whoever picks up any of their carcasses shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. Concerning all the animals which divide the hoof, but do not have a split hoof, or which you do not chew the cud, they are unclean to you. Whoever touches them becomes unclean. Also, all animals that walk on their paws, among all kinds of animals that walk on four legs, are unclean to you. Whoever touches their carcasses becomes unclean until evening. And the one who picks up their carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening, and they are unclean to you. These also are unclean to you among the swarming things that crawl around on the ground and multiply profusely: the mole, the mouse, and any kind of great lizard. No lizards. Yes, unclean. The gecko, the crocodile, the lizard, and the sand reptile, and the chameleon. These creatures are unclean to you among all that swarm. Whoever touches them when they are dead becomes unclean until evening. And anything on which one of them falls after dying becomes unclean, whether an article of wood or clothing or skin or a sack. Any article that is used, it must be put in water, and it will be unclean until the evening. Then it becomes clean. As for any earthenware containers into which any of these crawling things fall, whatever it is and becomes unclean, you shall break the container. Any of the food which may be eaten, but on which unclean water falls, shall become unclean, and the liquid that may be drunk in every container shall become unclean. Everything that part of the carcass falls on becomes unclean. An oven or a small stove shall be smashed. They are unclean and shall be unclean to you. Nevertheless, a spring or a cistern, reservoir collecting water, shall be clean, but whoever touches one of these carcasses shall be unclean. If a part of the carcass falls on any seed for sowing which is to be sown, is unclean. But if water is put on the seed, and part of their carcass falls on it, it is unclean to you. If one of the animals that you may touch dies of natural causes, whoever touches its carcass becomes unclean until evening. And whoever eats some of its meat shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. And also whoever picks up its carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean till evening. And everything that swarms on the ground is detestable. It is not to be eaten. Whatever crawls on its belly, and whatever walks on all fours, and whatever has many feet among all things that swarm on the ground, you shall not eat, for they are detestable. Do not make yourselves any loathsome, impure, or repulsive by eating any swarming things. You shall not make yourself unclean by them, so as to defile yourself. For I am the Lord your God, so consecrate yourself and be holy, for I am holy. You shall not make yourselves unclean with any of the swarming things that swarm or crawl on the ground. For I am the Lord who brought you up from the land of Egypt to be your God. Therefore you should be holy, for I am holy. This is the law regarding the animals and the birds and every living thing that moves in the waters and everything that swarms on the earth, to make a distinction between the ceremonially unclean, and the ceremonially clean, and between the animal that may be eaten and the animal that may not be eaten. Interesting. You think about the different animals. I remember reading one time about that. It's yes, God says we can have pig, we can have those things now, but pork is not naturally. I mean, I understand a lot of things are not very good for us because of the way we do farming and things nowadays, but isn't pork considered a little bit more bad for your diet? Bad for your, if you eat a lot of it, it's not good for your arteries. That was something I read. So I'm like, okay, God had a plan back then. He knew what we were supposed to eat, what we were not supposed to eat. So it goes through, it's good that he's so specific on what to do. So there's no question on anything. So lots of good reading. We're sticking through it. This is your daily Bible chapter, reading God's Word Monday through Friday. See you tomorrow.